and not for any kind of way out there, woo-woo, magical, mystical type of reasons. It actually makes very rational, very logical sense. When you're that person who can take your focus off of yourself and place it on serving others, discovering what they need, what they want, what they desire, what problems do they have that you can help solve, how do you help move them closer to happiness? When you do that, people feel great about you. They want to get to know you. They like you. They trust you. They want to be part of your life. They want to be in relationship with you. They want to do business with you. And more than anything, they want to tell the world about you.
This podcast is certified fresh. FreshMediaWorks.com.
Welcome to Lunch with Chris, where your host, Chris Daly, brings you uplifting interviews with extraordinary individuals making a positive impact. Join as he introduces remarkable people who have left their mark on their respective fields.
My next guest is a Floridian by way of Boston, a sportscaster turned publisher and author whose books include such greats as The Go-Giver and Endless Referrals. I will introduce you to Bob Burg right after this. Have you ever thought about doing your own podcast? It is the absolute best way to grow your brand, spread your message, and build your following. Fresh Media Works can help. We do all the heavy lifting, and you just focus on your message. To find out how easy we can make launching your new podcast, call 713-269-4620 or check us out at freshmediaworks.com. All right, everybody, join me in welcoming the one and only Bob Burg to the show. Bob, how are you doing today?
Great. Wow, what a nice introduction. Thank you.
It was pretty small, you know. I mean, I didn't go into all the details because I'm going to ask you all the details.
Well, yeah, but, no need. The details don't even interest me, you know. So
I love it. Obviously, I discovered you the way a lot of people have with the book, The Go-Giver. And I do want to talk about that. But first, I want to go back. Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Natick, Massachusetts, a suburb of Boston, about 20 minutes west. When I grew up, it was kind of a small town, great place to grow up. Nice. I think it's, from what I understand now, it's turned into a pretty major city. It's still a nice place, but I've been in Florida now, Jupiter, Florida, for about 35 years.
Sweet. And so what got you into writing, public speaking, you know, all the stuff you do?
Yeah, you know, I began as a broadcaster, first in radio doing sports, and then television news. I was with a very small ABC affiliate in the Midwest, in Oklahoma, and I was doing the late night news. I really wasn't very good at it, though. You know, I'm reminded of there's a movie where the person says to Bill Murray's character, you know, you look more like a game show host than a scientist. I was Ghostbusters, I think, and it was the same with me. I'd have made a better talk show or a better game show host than a news anchor. And so it really wasn't long before I wasn't in news anymore, and so I got into sales. Just as a way to make some money. Yeah, you know, I kind of had nothing else that I could do. And I started out in sales really floundering because I had no sales experience, but I found a couple books in the library on sales. One was by Tom Hopkins, the other by Zig Ziglar, one of your fellow Texans, and you know, two icons in the sales space. And, you know, I studied I like to say I didn't read their books, I devoured them. And they gave me a methodology for being able to sell. And really within a short period of time, my sales began to go through the roof. But the interesting thing was more than just the sales techniques and so forth, which are, you know, very important. It was more the personal development aspect. And so it was suggested to read books like How to Win Friends and Influence People and The Magic of Thinking Big and Psycho-Cybernetics and As a Man Thinketh, and, you know, all these classic books. And I really just loved the entire concept. And so eventually I worked my way up to sales manager of another company, and people started asking me to show their companies what, yada, yada, yada. Eventually, I started going to speaking as a business. And my first book was written just as a way of positioning myself as a speaker. And then years later, I met John David Mann, and we co-authored the Go-Giver.
Nice. And you just breezed past something that's real important there, the devouring of books. You hear so many people said, oh, yeah, I've read How to Win Friends and Influence People. I've read The Power of Positive Thinking, but they haven't really devoured them and studied them. Talk about the importance of that.
Oh, you bring up such a great point because, it's one thing to just read something and say, okay, yeah, I read it, but it's another thing to really take in that information and take notes and, question premises and when you see something that's great, to practice it, to really make it part of get it into your head and then into your heart, right? Make it part of your essence. And so when we do that, wow, it just, and you know what the key is, I think, with success? It's really an inside job. I mean, success manifests itself outwardly, absolutely. But it begins inside. It's what we put into our head, into our heart. It's who we listen. One of the greatest speakers of all time, his name was Charlie Tremendous Jones. And he was a mentor of mine toward, near the end of his life. But he used to say, the only difference between where you are now and 5 years from now are the people you meet and the books you read. And with him, it was more devouring than reading. He was just great with that kind of thing. And I think that's really what it is. We start out at a certain place. We certainly don't have to stay there. Right
on. And so I'm going to totally steal that line. Success is an inside job. I love that.
Oh, thank you. Somebody must have said it before me because I'm not that smart. I like to say I've never had an original thought in my life, and I'm darn proud of it.
Nice. I love that. Well, who was it who said, great artists steal, right?
Yeah. Now, what we should do is credit, of course, if we know who the source is.
Sure.
Sure. And because my colleague Scott McCain says, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. He says when it comes to, writing and so forth, imitation is the greatest form of theft. So it's always good to, and so I have no idea who might have said success is an inside job. I imagine many people do. But, I've often had people read my books and say, wow, why do you always just keep crediting people? Why it makes it look like you haven't had any thoughts. And, like I said earlier, I haven't. So, so it makes total sense to me. But it's the right thing to do. So that's really the reason why you do it.
Yeah, I was talking with Jeffrey Gitomer, and his rule is, he's a great guy. He said that if I take something from you, I'm going to credit you 3 times, and after that, it's mine.
That sounds like something Jeffrey would say. But Jeffrey does credit people. He's a great guy.
He really is. And speaking of that, talk about the relationships you have with other speakers, because people think, in a lot of industries, it's dog eat dog and it's competition, but there's a camaraderie there too.
There really is. Many of my greatest friends to this day, I met 30 plus years ago when I first joined the National Speakers Association and went to the first convention. And, there's people who are still my friends from that first one, and some of my just greatest friendships. And, in any business, you've got all types, but the ones that and generally the people I hang out with, if you will, or associate with, are people who live much more on the creative plane than the competitive plane. Not that there's not a, time for competition too. When you're in a ball game, you've written books on it, right? In a ball game, you're competition. It's great. But when you live on that creative plane, you're more, it doesn't mean you don't have competition. It means that instead of focusing on your competition, you're focused on creating value for the marketplace. And when you do that, you're operating on a whole different plane. But I've had so many mentors were fellow speakers, and they've been just some of the best relationships.
Nice. And speaking of relationships, you say you co-wrote The Go-Giver. Talk about the inspiration for that book, how it came about.
Yeah, so back in the 90s, the mid-90s, my first book was called Endless Referrals, and the subtitle was Network Your Everyday Contacts into Sales. And that was a how-to book for salespeople and entrepreneurs who knew they had a great product or service. They were proud of it. They knew it had great value, but they didn't necessarily feel comfortable going out into their local communities and building the kind of relationships or knowing how to build the kinds of relationships that would cause people to want to do business with them directly and or refer them to others. So it was a how-to guide, and the basic premise, and something I've been saying for, 35 years or whatever, is that all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust. So, it's been fortunately a successful book, but, it's a how-to book, and I'd always loved reading parables. So whether it was Og Mandino's Greatest Salesman in the World or James Classen's Richest Man in Babylon, or you had in the late 70s, early 80s, Doctors Blanchard and Johnson, the 1-Minute Manager. These days you have people like Chris Widener, and of course the great John Gordon, and people like Andrea Walsh, just great, and who write these wonderful parables. And I think we all sort of know that parables, because they're stories connect. They connect with people on a deeper heart level, I think. And I always thought, wouldn't it be great if we take the basic idea from Endless Referrals and write a parable? But I'm not a storyteller. I mean, I can tell a story from stage, but it's typically a true story. It's something that happened. There's a difference between that and writing a work of fiction, which is what a parable is. Even though it's based on true principles, it's still a work of fiction. And that was just not something that I knew I could pull off by myself. Fortunately, I met John David Mann in the early 2000s because he was the editor-in-chief of a magazine I used to write for. And even back then, he had such a great reputation. He was a fantastic writer. He was the greatest editor I'd ever worked with, and just a humble, good guy. And I told him about this just basic idea that I had. It wasn't fleshed out at all. It was just very basic. And I told him I'd love for him to be the lead writer and storyteller. And, he was, busy even then at that time, but he and his back then fiance, now his wife, Anna, they were visiting her mom in the Tampa area, Tampa, Florida, which is across the state from me. So they drove over one afternoon, 4 hours, had about a 3-hour dinner. We discussed the book, and then they drove back to her mom's. And about 3 weeks later, John called me and said, I think we got something here. Let's do this. So, we wrote it. And again, the credit to John for being just an amazing storyteller. But what happened is the tough part wasn't writing the book, which we did in about 3 months. The tough part was getting a publisher, because we got turned down by 24 different New York publishing houses over the course of a year before the 25th one, Portfolio, a division of Penguin Random House, decided to pick us up. And it turned out to be great because they were a fantastic publishing partner.
Nice. And talk about that, the actual reception of the book. Right now, it seems like every networking group in the world knows about this book and mentions it on their to-read list. How did it start?
Fortunately, it got off to a good start, which doesn't always happen. And, most of my life, I've always been that guy who, nothing came really easy in terms of, any kind of success. And I think like most of us, you hear about those instant successes, but they're pretty few and far between, I think. Most of us, we get a lot of no's before we get the yeses, but the book got off to a good start. And I think that was probably because John and I both had a pretty good network and a lot of great relationships. And we sent out a lot of pre-copies of the book. And so we had a lot of people who wanted to get behind it. But what happened was, and I think one big reason for the start was, and these were just the emails that we got, our first wave of emails we received were from people who didn't need the book. It was the people who already had built successful careers, and what they wrote back was basically, the theme was, this is how I've always done it. You just put into words what I've always done, But then they said, but nobody ever believes me because, you know, people have been brought up with this, you know, the great salespeople or great business people have to be horrible and ruthless and, you know, the rest of the whole thing. And so they would use our books and put the books through their organization, and we became sort of the third-party credibility to communicate the message that they had tried to communicate. And then the second wave of adapters, I guess you could call them, or adopters, were the ones who would say they received the book either from their mentor, their sales manager, or the CEO, or whatever, and it's helped them. And so I think that's what happened. So there was a lot of good fortune in terms of people really getting behind the book, and so you know we're forever grateful for that.
Yeah, excellent. And I guess one of the things that it speaks to that you know I'm 100% behind is transitioning your brain, as you mentioned before, being an inside job, from a scarcity mentality to, you know, a mentality that, look, there's enough for everybody out there. So kind of explain that theory and how the book plays into that. Yeah.
So we say that basically being a go-giver, if you will, is about shifting your focus. And as you know, that's really where it all begins. So you're shifting your focus from getting to giving. Now, when we say giving, Chris, in this context, we simply mean constantly and consistently providing immense value to others, understanding that doing so is not only a more fulfilling way of conducting business, it's actually the most financially profitable way as well. And not for any kind of way out there, woo-woo, magical, mystical type of reasons. It actually makes very rational, very logical sense. When you're that person who can take your focus off of yourself and place it on serving others, discovering what they need, what they want, what they desire, what problems do they have that you can help solve, how do you help move them closer to happiness? When you do that, people feel great about you. They want to get to know you. They like you. They trust you. They want to be part of your life. They want to be in relationship with you. They want to do business with you. And more than anything, they want to tell the world about you. They want to be what we call your personal walking ambassadors. And when that happens, you're really creating an abundance for everybody. And you know, really, that's what it's all about.
Yeah. I don't remember if it was Ziegler or Jim Rohn who said, you help enough people get what they want, you get what you want.
Yeah, Zig Ziglar with his wonderful Yazoo City, Mississippi accent used to say, you can have everything in life you want if you just help enough other people get what they want.
Oh, I love that.
Now, see, I listened to Zig's tapes. Now, this is back in the day, right? Cassette tape albums, right? I would listen like 25 times, you know, straight through, beginning to end. You know, I knew everything that Zig, you know. No, I didn't try to be Zig. I didn't actually do that accent when I would do sales presentations, but I learned it.
That is so wonderful. That is a special treat, and thank you for that.
Well, it's funny, you know, Tom Ziegler, I don't know if you know Tom Ziegler, Zig's son, and Tom has done a magnificent job of really carrying on his dad's legacy. You know, I always say to Tom, you know, you and I were both blessed with great parents, and that's like the biggest advantage anybody can have, you know. And but Tom and his siblings have just done a magnificent job of carrying on Zig's wonderful legacy. And so I've done that imitation for Tom, and Tom just, in fact, I did it for Tom, Mrs. Ziegler, and Zig on stage when I used to put on public events, and Zig got our first Go-Giver Lifetime Go-Giver Achievement Award, and I actually did a riff from one of Zig's albums right in front of the three of them, and they just, you know, really enjoyed it, and that was a thrill for me to be able to do that.
Oh, I bet. And so you mentioned the speaking, and how did that start? Did you have it started already before the book, or was this, like you mentioned, the launch?
Yeah, it was before the book. And what happened when I was sales manager of a company where I was working, actually, it was Zig came to speak at the Oklahoma City Civic Center, and there was another guy doing a program. His name was Billy Burton, and I, bought their tapes and everything. And at the end of Billy's tapes, there was a kind of an advertisement that said, if you would like to, or it didn't say, it was in the back of the booklet part, that said, if you'd like to make some extra money selling these tapes, call our office and let us know. Right? Oh, that sounds interesting. So I called the office, and what it was that you could learn how to, learn Billy's stuff, and they would show you how to give 25 to 30 minute free presentations, where at the end you would sell the cassettes and you'd basically split the profits. This sounds great. So I did that, and they were wonderful people. And from what I understand, I was their leading salesperson in the country. But I don't know how many people even there were who went out and did that, but I did. So I thought it was great, and that got me really into that. Wow, I really enjoy this. Going up and speaking. You're teaching in a way. I think by nature I'm a teacher, and that's what I really love doing. And I know that's your field, of course. And so it's kind of that combination of teaching, of sharing knowledge, of being able to go out there and sell and to speak. And I thought, this is really fun, and I'd like to try to do that. And so I did what I usually do. I got a book on speaking, and then in that book they said, if you really want to be a professional speaker, join the National Speakers Association. Well, I'm a good student, so I said, okay. So I found out how to do that and started attending the meetings, learning from them how to have a speaking practice, and in fact my first book, that first book, Endless Referrals, was a result. I was at I don't know if it was my first or second or third convention, but I was speaking to a couple of people there. I don't remember who the first one was. The second one, his name was Randy Pennington. Randy's from the Dallas area, and great speaker on leadership, a wonderful human being. And Randy and this other person, I wish I could remember who it was, but they had said, Burg, you really should write a book. You're far enough along now where this book's gonna be. And I said, well, I'm not sure I really want to write a book. And I said, well, you really should anyway, because it's going to help position you better. You're going to get higher fees. You're going to be more marketable. You're going to have, and Randy actually introduced me to his agent, who liked the idea of the book, and he got that first book published right away. Found a publisher right away. So again, a lucky break, I guess. Right place, right time, but right people too, who were there to help. And so yeah, that's really how that came about.
Excellent. And you mentioned, over time you get better fees. How did it start out? Were they paying for your hotel and that's it, or how did it grow?
Well, once I became a professional speaker, and because when I was, selling all the tapes, those were all totally free. I paid everything. I just traveled everywhere, stayed in hotel, really inexpensive motels and so forth, and did my thing. And but yeah, once I started speaking, professionally, I charged a fee, but it was a very low fee. Even from back in the day, it was a very low fee. And yeah, they pay for travel, hotel, and a low fee, and then I'd come in and do my thing. And you start out doing that, and really, what I did at the time is what a lot of the speakers did. There was a directory you could buy. Now, of course, everything's online. Back then, that wasn't even a thing. So it was the National Trade Professional Association directory and the State and Regional Association directory, and those are kind of the two Bibles of the speaking thing, right? Because you went there, you chose your niche, you made call after call after call after call, and you learned how to do that, and the procedure that you needed to do. And I would book my speaking engagements, and got lots and lots and lots and lots of no's before I get a yes. And then you can start working the referral aspect of it, and now you start building it from there. But there were a lot of ups and downs those first few years.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. And what do you think was the big change to go from staying in an inexpensive motel to filling a ballroom and having your expenses covered? What was the big change? Was it just time and connections?
Yeah, I think that's what it was. It's like anything else. You kind of you grow as you do it, and eventually people start to take notice. And it wasn't a passive thing. I made sure whenever I did something that was worthy of notice, or could be, I made sure everybody on my prospect list knew it.
So now, at your career's level where you're at now, what does a typical week or month or year look like for you?
Well, here's what it doesn't look like. It doesn't look like me getting on a plane, because at 66, I have taken myself off the road. Last year was the first year in, I guess, 35 years I did not step on a plane, and I loved it. You know what? Excuse me. During the COVID, the first COVID year, I didn't either, I guess. But let's say willingly not step on a plane. And so, over the last, I'd say 7 or 8 years, I had brought down the number of speaking engagements I would do. But I just decided, at this point, I don't want to be on the road anymore. So I still do keynotes via computer, although not as, because most of them, they want people there in person, but I still do them, sometimes via computer. But really the only engagements I do now, we still have people. We have my business partner, Kathy Tagenell, and we have what we call the Go Giver Beyond the Mastermind retreat. And we're very small. We limit them to 8 people, plus 2 of our certified Go Giver speakers as master coaches, and Kathy and me. And we meet at a hotel a mile away from my house. Nice. It's short, which is very close, so I even sleep in my own bed. I don't even sleep at the hotel. And we do those about once every 2 months. And I just I actually did another book, another parable on how to effectively work within objections, and I wrote that with a guy from the Houston area, Jeff West, and we're going to now start doing larger sales conferences on that topic. But again, it's going to be in the Jupiter, West Palm Beach area, so I won't travel for it. So, and we have an online mentorship, group mentorship community called Go Giver Success Alliance. So everything, as you can tell, is from either right in front of my computer or about a mile away in my town. So that's what my days look like now.
I love that. And that was my next question. Could you explain the Go Giver Success Alliance?
Yeah, so this is a group of people who are part of our membership. It's just $37 a month. And what we do is we meet the first Wednesday of every month for an hour and a half. I do about 20 to 25 minutes of teaching on a topic, personal or professional development, and then we have discussion. We go into breakouts, which people love, and then we spend the rest of the time, again, with question and answer. And that's what we call that coffee and conversation with Bob. But then also the people, they really form great relationships with one another. There's a lot of collaboration that goes on. There's also other benefits of membership, such as the weekly challenge that we put out, the Cup of Wisdom, which a video I do on a different book that, from which we get wisdom from. And it's just a real magnificent group of successful people.
Nice. So, I always assume that because I know who you are very well, that, everybody knows about Burg. But so for young people, maybe people starting out, where do you suggest they start to find out about you? What books or what's the best way to learn?
Well, probably just going to my website, Burg, BURG.com, is the best place to go. And, starting with the book, The Go Giver, might be a great way to do it. There's also, there's the, I have a blog that, they can go into the archives of the podcast, even though I don't do the podcast anymore. But what they can subscribe to when they go onto the site is a daily impact email that I produce every day. That goes out Monday through Friday, first thing in the morning. And it's just usually a nugget of hopefully wisdom, might have to put background wisdom, but I like to think they are, that hopefully will inspire someone throughout the day. So that's probably, the best place to even start.
Excellent. Yeah, and I have to say, I get the email newsletter, and it's good stuff.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Bob Burg, I want to thank you so much for sitting down with me, sharing some of your story, inspiration, and gosh, I can't thank you enough.
Oh, Chris, the pleasure is mine. Thank you for everything you do. You bring so much joy and so much value to everyone.